Thank you for tuning into Adversity University and welcome to class. This is Sean. Today we have a great interview dropping. Stu Smith, Navy SEAL. I know a lot comes with that title in general. It was awesome to get more into that story. You know, when you think of a Navy SEAL, you just think of a badass, and they go through the BUDS training and all this training and what they do to protect our country every day. But it was great to pick his mind a little bit now that he is on the end of that career and onto another journey in life. He has hindsight on what that experience was like, and he gives a lot of good advice that I think isn't just applicable to military training. That's a huge thing I took away from this, is that his advice is applicable to any goal you're trying to reach. Garrett, what do you think?
Yeah, Stu was a great interview, and it was fun for me and Sean because this was our first interview that we didn't have a direct connection to. Neither Sean or I know Stu personally. We just reached out to him, and we were fortunate enough that he decided to come on the podcast. And like all the interviews or other interviews that we've had, just really inspirational in their story. You know, obviously with the title on our podcast, Adversity University, there was a lot of tough times that Stu faced, and he found ways to get through that. And he talks about in the episode, and I love one of the things he talks about is just having a great mental mindset is what really pushed him through a lot of those tough times, and the support group that he had around him and his friends that helped keep him on the right path and didn't let him veer too off. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy this episode. Me and Sean really enjoyed doing the interview. It's always great hearing these stories and learning from their experiences because we obviously have our own, but you can only learn so much from your experience.
And our other big thing is that everyone has a path, everyone has a journey, and no two paths are the same. Going back on what Garrett said about the mental side of things, he talks about finding the fuel when the tank is empty. I think that was a great part of the interview, and I also loved when he talked about how iron sharpens iron. I do have to give a quick shout out to Dylan Lubismeyer. He's a teammate of mine up at Robert Morris. He actually helped me identify Stu. He's training himself to become a Navy SEAL, and he does Stu's workouts now. So I had a little bit of a connection there, and really happy things worked out. Let's kick it on over to Stu. For all you listeners out there that don't know where Garrett and I began our hockey journey, it was with the Colorado Rampage, where a list of other notable alumni also began their career as young student athletes. The Colorado Rampage AAA hockey program is currently accepting registrations for their tryouts and identification camps to find elite players and people looking to play AAA hockey and take their career to the next level. The Rampage play in the Tier 1 Elite League, which is one of the best AAA leagues in the country. This is where your players will get to showcase their skill in front of scouts for the best junior teams, colleges, and even professional teams in North America. We would encourage anyone between the ages of 12 and 18 who are looking for a place to develop and start their hockey career the same way we did to send an email to playAAA@coloradorampage.org to get more information. That's PLAYAAA@CORAMPAGE.org. You can also visit their website at www.corampage.com. Be better today than you were yesterday and join the herd. Today's guest is our first non-athlete. His work is much more important. He's a former Navy SEAL. He now coaches at the Naval Academy, working with the Spec Ops team, which is a club activity for future SEAL, EOD, and Marine candidates. He's also the current owner of Stu Smith Fitness, where he prepares Americans to serve in the military, special ops, police, and firefighting. He is the author of many books about tactical training and fitness, and he also owns the Tactical Fitness Report podcast. His gym gave away the name, but welcome to Adversity University, Stu Smith.
Hey, thank you. This is a lot of fun. Hey, I used to be an athlete.
Yeah, sorry. We met Kurt.
What's non-athlete? I never thought of myself as a non-athlete, but that's all right. Yeah. Back in the day, I was back in high school. It was football, powerlifting, wrestling, baseball. And then powerlifting screwed up my baseball, so then I ran track and threw shot put. So this is a journey through all kinds of different things. And in college, I played rugby. So
okay.
So yeah.
How was your Memorial Day?
It's great. Got the Murph done. Yeah, the
Nice.
Memorial Day Murph workout. I do that all the time. I mean, it's something that you don't want to do just once a year. Otherwise, it will cripple you. So you got to stay in shape to be able to handle it and not be, hurting the next few days. But I did it with my son, who is 17 years old, for the first time. So that was a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if non-athlete was the correct term, because I'm willing to bet that you're probably in better shape and a better athlete than me and Sean both are. So,
well, thank you for that. But non-athlete is fine. I understand. You guys interview a lot of current athletes, and I get it.
Ex-athlete.
I used to play. That's part of the kind of like the athletic history. Someone brings into special ops training. It kind of determines where their strengths and weaknesses are going to be. So it's very important. Whenever I'm as a trainer, I always ask, what sports do you play? Because that kind of determines to me where I need to kind of guide them on getting good at everything. Because an athlete has to get really good at a few elements of fitness, like strength and power, if you're, speed and agility, if you're a football player, or endurance and technique, if you're a runner or a swimmer. But they don't need to get good at all of them. Whereas the tactical athlete has to diversify their, elements of fitness and be able to do all of those things, be able to run and swim and carry load on their backs, as well as, be strong to be able to do that without hurting themselves, but then, have all the muscle stamina in the world to be able to just continue on. So it's kind of the difference between an athlete and a tactical athlete, if you would.
Yeah, no, I agree. So going back to your, earlier in your career, your athletic days, as we're saying, what was your childhood like growing up in Live Oak, Florida?
Yeah, you done some research. Yeah, Live Oak. Yeah, that is my hometown in North Florida. It was a great little place. I miss it. I go back as often as I can. I still have a lot of friends there. My parents have moved, so I kind of go back a little bit less. But great place to grow up. I mean, it was one of those Friday night lights towns where the whole town came out to your football games, and you might I think we only had like 10,000 people in the whole county. Wow. But we'd have 5,000-6,000 people at football games. So that's awesome. I mean, it was a lot of fun. And we traveled around from county to county every week to play sports, and that was what it was. We played a lot of sports, or you didn't. Which I found life kind of boring if I wasn't doing something there. Worked hard in school, tried to make good grades, and worked hard in the summers. We always had a job in the summer, and most of it was very physical manual labor. One of my favorite jobs I ever had was working in a watermelon field with the rest of the crew was, half the football team. And we would work from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. throwing watermelons from the ground into a truck. And then we go lift weights after all that and get ready for football season. And we typically did really well with football. We had a lot of tough kids, that just worked hard and played hard and, really played the game well. So it was a good place to grow up. I miss it.
It sounds like you guys had a great bond too, if you were working together 12 hours a day before practice.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was incredible. Yeah. I mean, they're some of my best friends today, definitely.
What motivated you to join the military? And without getting too in depth into your story quite yet, what is the process like going from a normal civilian to a Navy SEAL?
Yeah, you know what? I knew I wanted to serve. I just didn't know how I wanted to serve, and a couple opportunities came to me through athletics. I was recruited for football for various colleges, and then, Army popped on my radar and Navy popped on my radar, and I put two and two together. I'm like, oh yeah, the Army-Navy game. And then I did a little more research, and I realized that both of those were colleges. I didn't even know West Point and Naval Academy. I didn't know. I mean, I was in 10th, 11th grade. And that's when I was like, you know what, I'm going to try to go to one of those. And I just kind of had that general thought. So I knew I wanted to serve, but being able to play a sport and serve and go to college, and, everybody in my family's happy because I'm getting a college degree, but I'm happy because I'm playing a sport, but I'm also happy because I'm serving. So it was kind of like a great compromise for my parents, besides just, enlisting right out of high school, they would have rather me gone to college first and then join the military. So anyway, that was my personal journey. I knew I just wanted to serve somewhere, just didn't know where when I was a kid. Typical play with GI Joes and play Army soldier and all that stuff. But anyway, that was my life growing up. I always kind of knew that. Top Gun came out, and I was like, oh man, yeah, be a pilot, that'd be cool. So the journey was there. I knew I was heading in that direction even as a young teenager. But the process to get into Navy Special Warfare or Navy SEALs, that's what you asked for specifically, right? Navy SEALs.
Correct.
I've written a lot of articles about it on stewsmith.com because it is a process, and it's probably something that kind of treat it like a reference sheet and just check off the marks. But if you go to sealswcc.com, SEALSWCC.com, it's got all the different routes because there's a bunch of different routes you can do. You can go right out of high school, you can go after college, you can enlist, you can go officer, there's ROTC, there's OCS, there's Naval Academy. So there's a lot of different journeys that get you to SEAL training. One isn't particularly easier than the other. They're all fairly competitive these days. You need to go in there really fit. Like you can't go into a recruiter's office and say, oh yeah, I think I want to be a SEAL, and having never done the SEAL fitness test, for instance, because within a few weeks, you're going to be taking that SEAL fitness test and you have to do really well on it. If you don't do really well on it, you just kind of languish there in this delayed entry program process until you pass the fitness test, which really isn't doing yours any good because you're just going to pass a fitness test. You've gotten to the training. You haven't figured out how to get through the training yet. And you can't just get through the training by preparing for a fitness test. There's so much more than the fitness test offers, right? So the fitness test is 500-yard swim, push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, and a 1.5-mile run. However, you got to score real well on that, but to be competitive, but to get through the training, you're going to have to endure logs, on your shoulders and boats on your heads and 4-mile timed runs every week and 2-mile swims with scuba fins in the ocean every week, and obstacle courses. And that's a 6-month process. So you kind of have to build up your durability. You have to build up your work capacity because there's no 30-minute gym workout that's going to prepare you for 12 hours of SEAL training, a day. So that is kind of the journey that they have to go through.
Now we have an overview of your path, and the audience has an overview. What was your journey like as a SEAL and, going to the academy? Can you just touch on what you had to go through and the ups and downs of that journey?
Yeah, well, I went in there thinking I was going to play football for Navy, right? So I got in good Navy football shape. And when I showed up at Plebe Summer, which is kind of like our form of boot camp, there's a fitness test that's involved. I think back then it was push-ups, sit-ups. I think we had a broad jump and a mile run. And I failed my first fitness test when I showed up there, and then, I was able to get better over the course of the summer and pass it at the end of the summer. And then I actually maxed it the next time I had to take it for a grade. So there was a, 6-month process there where I learned what I needed to learn about military fitness, how it was so much different from my football preparation. And long story short, I didn't make the football team. Once academic year started, I was failing in 2 courses. And remember, I don't think I made a few, but maybe a few B's in high school. I mean, so, it was just an awful experience, failing a fitness test, not making a football team that I've been dreaming for years to be able to play college ball. And then, failing academically too. There wasn't a whole lot I was doing well in, I would say, my first 6 months of the Naval Academy. And I remember coming home to Thanksgiving, and I was crying. I was like, this is just awful. I think my girlfriend dumped me too, to throw it on top of it. So it was just it was rough being 18 years old and dealing with all of that. And I just remember my mom saying, well, why don't you come home? It sounds awful. Why don't you just come home? I was like, I can't quit. And then she said, well, quit crying and go, let's figure this out, and figure out how you're going to make it through there. And that's where I kind of realized that I had focused so much energy of my life getting to the Naval Academy that I never once considered, what do I need to do to prepare to get through the Naval Academy? Right. And so I spent the next good year trying to figure that out. And eventually, obviously, I figured that out and made my way through that process. But I've held on to that to and through process for forever, because I see a lot of people go to the SEAL training and they make it to SEAL training fine, but they don't make it through SEAL training. Right. And there's a preparation phase in tactical fitness that I think a lot of people neglect. I call it phase 1 being getting to the training, phase 2 getting through the training. And that is where I failed in those first 6 months. But I like I said, I figured it out.
So how frustrating was it that you dedicate a large majority of your life into being a good candidate? And as you mentioned, being on the football team, and once you got there, you failed a lot of the initial tests. And was your mom kind of giving you a little bit of a kick in the ass, like harden up here and figure it out, or just quit? Was that kind of your motivating factor, or what other circumstances or people helped you get through that tough time?
Well, yes, I think she was playing a little bit of reverse psychology with me. And in hindsight, after talking to her years later, she said that was the hardest thing she ever had to say come out of her mouth, was she did not want me to quit.
Yeah.
But I think she wanted me to realize that it was me that wanted to be there, in the first place. And she kind of made me realize, I remember being, that 17-year-old kid that wanted to go, and I was there and I didn't have that desire, after all these failures, and it was almost that brink of, quitting. But she also knew that I probably wouldn't quit. I'd probably be kicked out for not meeting a standard or something. But, we figured it out. And, my mom was able to say, hey, look, you need to go back there and find people who are doing well and figure it out. Right. And so I went to the study skills instruction that they had there, that just people learn how to study. And, from going from high school to college, it's a big difference. I mean, you have to up your game. And I didn't realize that. I think, I had a pretty solid game in Florida, where I was, good academics, good athletics, just had a really kind of smooth say. I worked hard though, don't get me wrong, but I didn't really fail at a whole lot. And then, hitting that, brick wall of failure, it's hard to get used to. It's hard to overcome that, especially when you're not used to failing. I think a lot of people that fail, these spec ops programs are people like that just grew up never failing anything. And then their first dose of failure really drops their, self motivation, maybe their self-confidence, to a level where they start saying, well, maybe I don't belong here. Right. And they fall even lower, versus I need to figure out how to make it through here, and they figure it out. So, I'd spent the next year not only having, my classmates to help me with studying, and, organization, just all these little mental preparations that helped me be a better student. I still never played football, but I found rugby And that was a life changer for me there because, one, it was less time commitment where I could focus more on studying, but it was fun and it was aggressive and it was like-minded guys. And we had at least 4 or 5 members of the rugby team that went SEAL teams every year. So there were, 2, 3 years of guys in front of me that I really looked up to, and I saw what you needed to do to make it through. Right. So it's almost like seeing it to believe it. You have to see it to believe it. I saw that. And then what was even better is by the time I was a junior, some of those guys that were a couple of years ahead of me would come back and visit, and they'd already made it through SEAL training. And I'm like, wow, this is possible, right? It's not impossible. So I think seeing it to believe it really kind of takes away that impossibility factor that occurs when you're going through some of these hard challenges and goals that you set for yourself. And then once you see people actually doing it, people that are doing it, it really helps you kind of internalize that this is just a stepping stone, right? It's not an impossibility anymore. It's just something I have to endure to get to where I want to be.
Right. Garrett and I are very fortunate to have similar goals as well. And I think something very important is surrounding yourself with people who are going to motivate you and help you like you did. I think one of my favorite quotes is, tell me your dreams and show me your closest friend group, and I'll tell you whether or not you'll achieve that dream.
Yeah.
So
very important. Yeah.
You learned a lot from them, and you guys motivated each other. So that's amazing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We made each other better. It was, one of those days, one of us didn't feel like training, but the other 3 or 4 of us said, come on, we're going, or we'd make fun of them for missing, or whatever that was, and, so it's very good, positive peer pressure.
Yeah, right.
I should say, and they just made you stronger, iron sharpens iron. I mean, that is so true.
A main goal of ours is to show listeners that failures are just an opportunity to grow and learn. You talked about learning that there's a phase 2 of the journey. Can you talk about all 3 phases that you teach?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Well, tactical fitness is a little bit different than athletic fitness like we discussed earlier. But first of all, you have to get to the training, right? And that typically means first phase is you have this fitness test that you have to not only pass, but it may take several months for you to be able to be competitive in some of these jobs as well, because they're not going to take just passing grades. They're going to take the top 25% of those grades, scores to be able to move on forward. So you have to get to a certain level of fitness just to get to the training. But afterwards, depending on what that journey is, you have to prepare specifically for some of those challenges that are in front of you, whether it is a police academy, fire academy, a boot camp, basic training, spec ops training, SEAL training, whatever that is. You need to learn ahead of time, just like I didn't learn ahead of time what I needed to do to make it through the Naval Academy. You need to learn ahead of time that, I really need to prepare for some of these painful events that I see on Instagram. I mean, these guys are carrying logs for miles. They got boats on their heads. Looks like they haven't slept for days. And they're always wet and sandy. All these little things that you like, I haven't added any of that to my training. How do I know I'm going to endure any of that? So not that I recommend giving yourself a hell week, but you should start upping your game a little bit to be able to endure that kind of challenge. So that gets you through the training. And then phase 3 is a whole lot different. And I'll explain where people get all these 3 confused in a second. But phase 3 is now you're an active duty operator. You're doing your job and you're working out to maintain a certain standard so you can do your job well, because fitness at that level can be the difference between life or death, for yourself, for your buddy that's with you, for someone you're trying to save. No matter what your job is in the tactical professions, your fitness may save a life one day. That may be the determining factor between somebody living or dying. So I always play that hard because it's that serious at that level. But, you also see a lot. You see some traumatic events that can occur no matter what job you're in, the tactical professions. And some of them are very horrific and some are very sad, and it gets to you emotionally, that you need to also be able to understand how to mitigate the stresses that come with those jobs as well. So there's a very big component on recovery and stress mitigation. Nutrition, is all part of the process to help you be able to recover from those long days, long nights, high stress events that occur in these jobs as well. So that is phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 of tactical fitness, and they're all different, right? You can't go do some active duty Navy SEAL workout and think you're going to pass the fitness test, right? Or get through BUDS just because this active duty SEAL workout that, somebody posted is going to be, the greatest workout that gets you through BUDS. That's what's getting them to be able to do their job, which is completely different than BUDS. I mean, BUDS is just a kick in the nuts, and the last thing you want to do at BUDS or prepare for that is practice being kicked in the nuts. So you still have to train smart to get to that high level of fitness. And there's always this fine line between, building that durability and breaking, right? There's always that like fine line between training and overtraining, and there's also a fine line between mental toughness and stupidity, right? So you're balancing that line of just overdoing it too much, and being able to recover from that. So that's the challenge out there, no matter what phase you're in.
Love that you touch on the physical aspects of, obviously being a SEAL. And I think when anyone thinks of, going to the Army or Air Force or any of the special services, you obviously have to be very physically fit. But I think one thing that's important to note that you indirectly touched on was just the mental toughness that you have to have in order to accomplish these tasks. Because I feel like maybe there's not a limit on, how physically fit you can be, but definitely there'll be breaking points, as you mentioned, when you're going through this training that, it's your mental capacity that's going to take you farther than your physical fitness would.
Absolutely. Very good point, because there's going to be a moment when you are alone with your thoughts. You're cold, you're wet, you're sandy, you're tired, something hurts, you're uncomfortable. And those thoughts can be the difference between you saying, I'm done, or you saying, got to keep going. And, I always tell people, I heard this great quote. I can't remember who said it, but, don't listen to yourself, talk to yourself, because your body has a way and your mind has a way of saying, look, what you're doing right now is really stupid. You should stop. You're going to hurt yourself. Your body and your mind is geared for surviving another day. And if it thinks you're trying to kill yourself, it's going to try to stop you from doing that by saying, stop, makes no sense. So quit hurting yourself like this. So what you have to do at that point is it really comes down to your personal will and your ability to just say, you know what, I'm going to keep going, even when you don't feel like it. One of the best definitions of mental toughness I ever heard was finding the fuel when the tank is empty. And I love that saying because it says so much, but it's still vague enough to there's this mystery of mental toughness that it's hard to explain in written word or spoken word, that it's something that has to be experienced, if that makes sense.
For sure. I think any, mental toughness that you gain is all through experience. I know you said don't put yourself through hell week, but obviously if you're going to put yourself through hard workouts, you're going to learn to mentally be able to, handle those types of situations.
Sure.
But back to your story, once it was all said and done, you graduated from the academy. What was the most difficult time for you as a SEAL?
Oh, let's see. You know what? I got injured third phase. I was about 5 weeks from graduating my BUDS, and I'd been with my class the whole time. You know, we'd gone through Hell Week together. We'd gone through dive phase together. We'd about halfway through land warfare phase, land navigation and all that stuff. And I hurt my knee. And so I got rolled and I got dismissed from that class, and the class kept going on. And I remember going to their graduation, and man, that really sucked, you know, because I still had to go through third phase again and I had to heal first. But I had a knee injury that took me about 8 weeks to fully recover. I found out, I learned a lot about recovery with an injury. You know, I couldn't run. I was on crutches for at least 4 weeks of those 8 weeks. And then the last 4 weeks, I had to go back from, you know, an injury, not running, to being in bud shape again, third phase, and getting through. But, you know, I actually learned a lot about, you know, pulling the reins back on yourself, not overdoing it when you get back into it. And I just rode a bike for weeks. Everywhere I went, I rode a bike or I was on a stationary bike. And that was all I really did till about like 2 or 3 weeks before I had to class up again. Then I started running again, and I actually came back faster. You know, I had some really good running or biking workouts that I would do, and I still write about those same workouts that I did back then. And it really allowed me to recover, but it also allowed me to maintain and even build some cardiovascular ability to be a faster runner whenever I got back. So that was a neat thing I learned about it, even though it was a setback and I was pretty depressed that my body let me down. You know, I think that's how, you know, I don't know how most people are, but I tend to be, if I'm sick or if I'm injured, like in this minor state of depression of like, my body has failed me. And it's something that it requires me to kind of get over. And usually my wife snaps me out of it by calling me a big baby. But um, but yeah, I mean, it was not an easy process, but you know, the thing that you don't want to do in those moments is just stop doing anything, you know, everything. You know, you got to keep doing something, just to keep your sanity, but also to keep moving so you're able to maintain some level of fitness, especially if you're going to get back into that same level of training in a few short weeks.
When you're in the field, what mental or physical tricks have you learned to calm yourself down and focus on the mission at hand in a high pressure situation?
Well, I'll tell you, we all learned something, you know, while we were training, and it was simply breathing, you know, and it's no magic, you know, groundbreaking tool. You know, we have all learned over the years that breathing is the way to calm yourself down before, you know, whether it's shooting that free throw for the game winner or it's kicking a field goal for the game winner or whatever. It's the last strike, you know, ninth inning, you know, if you're the pitcher or the hitter, you know, you just take that big deep breath, kind of relax yourself, and just let the training take over, you know, almost like quit thinking about it too much and just let the training take over, and it relaxes you so you don't have all these obtrusive thoughts and waste of energy that's going on in your head, to screw you up from, you know, the task at hand. Simply breathing. But yeah, I mean, we learned it actually during shooting. You know, whenever you are shooting, you know, you want to have a nice calm breath, big deep inhale, big deep exhale, big deep inhale, and almost like a little pause in between your inhale and exhale. You can take a shot, and it just happens to be, you know, one of those things that just helps you relax, and you have a nice smooth shooting process and good aim and nothing shaking, and you actually shoot pretty well. But then, you know, we also learned that you can apply that to later on. You know, like I talk about that phase 3 of tactical fitness when we're dealing with stress mitigation. Some of the best ways to deal with the, you know, traumatic things that you see in this, you know, tactical professions is to, at the end of the day, just focus on your breathing. And whether you turn that into meditation or you turn that into just focus on your breathing and relaxing, listening to relaxing music, whatever that is, just brings you back down and engages that parasympathetic nervous system that is slows yourself down and helps you relax. So that is how you actually engage that thinking part of the brain, so you can actually get into, some of the tasks at hand that are somewhat complicated versus being, erratic and not being able to think through those things. But that is the best tool that I've used, whether it's, during training, trying to sleep at night when you can't sleep, or, when it's a high stress situation. Breathing is the number one tool to be able to get through those.
That's one thing that I learned, and I'm a goalie in hockey, so it's obviously a little bit different, but I take ice baths all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned if I control my breathing, it kind of helps slow me down. And similar thing with you went through BUDS, which is basic underwater demolition seal. And there's a bunch of athletes, Olympians, professional athletes, collegiate athletes have all tried to go through BUDS, and a lot of people actually fail. So what made you and the men that have, been successful in completing BUDS, what separates you from the average man?
Well, I am average, but I think, as far as my athletic abilities, absolutely average. I just work really hard. So, I mean, there's nothing about this 5'11" and a half, 200-pound dude that is above average in anything, right? I have been able to work my way onto making teams. I've been able to work my way through academics. I've been able to work my way into a spec ops world, just by sheer work and repeating that work, being consistent with that work. And I think that makes a big difference, to me. The average kid who's a decent, athlete, or maybe he just worked on a farm all his life, can get into BUDS and make it through fine, as long as they have that work ethic. And the biggest part, and I mentioned it earlier about will, you really need to want to do this job, because like I said, when that moment and you're alone with your own thoughts and everything's falling apart around you, you're cold, everything hurts, you're tired, you have to be able to say, keep on going versus not. And it really has nothing to do with your athletic ability at that point. It is your pure will that gets you through that. I mean, we have this one award at SEAL training. It's called the Fire in the Gut Award. And it goes to the guy who barely passed every single event at BUDS. He just barely passed. So if there was a ranking from valedictorian to anchorman, he'd kind of be that anchorman guy. Or he'd just be the guy that just never really excelled at anything, but he never quit trying, and he never, had a bad attitude about anything. He just kept going and kept plugging, and, he made it through just by pure guts alone, and maybe had the worst PT scores coming into the class, right? But he still made it through compared to the guy with the best PT scores who didn't make it. There's no magic solution to this. I'm figuring out how. I've been helping people get to BUDS and through BUDS for, over 25 years now, and I still haven't figured it out. Like, I have not figured out the perfect process or the solution for that moment. It really just comes down to how bad you want that at that moment. As long as you can stay healthy and not get hurt, that moment may not even occur. You may not have that moment where you're falling apart and you're cold and everything's wet and you're just having a bad day. You may not have to test yourself in that. But my answer to this question is really, you have to go there in a compete mindset, whether that is competing with other people in your class, but being a good teammate, but also just competing with yourself. and being better, and not quitting. And, you have to compete versus just going in there and trying to survive and just reaching through on the minimum standards, because you're so close to failing when you're flirting with minimum standards every day. But if you're thinking about winning, I promise you, you will never think about quitting. Now, you may not win everything, but you're going to be in the top 10%, of the class if you can do that. Yeah. But that is a really strong quote, because if you think about winning, you will never think about quitting. Promise. Unless the wheels fall off and you break your leg or something and medical occurs. But seriously, that is probably the biggest thing with mindset, going through buds. If you think about making it through that event by not just trying to survive it, but actually trying to crush it, quitting is not even an option in your vocabulary.
So for the viewers who don't know, the acronym BUDS actually stands for something pretty cool. Can you tell them what that is?
Yeah, it stands for Basic Underwater Demolition. It used to be school, but back in the late 60s or early 60s, they changed it to SEAL training, because our forefathers were the underwater demolition teams, which were the Navy frogmen, right, back in the 50s and early 60s. And they even had some UDT teams, even into the 80s, but they eventually all became SEAL teams. So now basic underwater demolition / SEAL training is what BUDS is.
And then SEAL stands for sea, air, and land, correct?
Yes. And that just means we dive, we swim, we jump out of airplanes, we do patrolling on land. So it's just the whole, pretty much anywhere you can operate, we try to get good at operating in.
Yeah. So we've been focusing a lot on your adversity, but what's one of your best memories from your time in the SEALs?
Oh man, that's a good question. I tell you, it never ceased to amaze me that no matter where we were, whether we were in a room, like with all the teammates, we were in the weight room, we were running or swimming or doing some ops, I realized pretty early that I was not the smartest guy in the room at all. And I wasn't the toughest guy in the room at all. I wasn't the strongest guy in the room at all. It was one of those things where I was just glad to be in the room. And I was honored to be among all these people that were like-minded. If you had a task, it got done. And you didn't have to tell anybody how to do it. They took the initiative to figure it out. And I can't remember how many times I said this to my guys. And I was an officer, coming out of the Naval Academy, and I had, a bunch of enlisted guys with me. And I can't tell you how many times I've said, how did you guys manage this? This is incredible. And they'd always say, don't ask, sir. It's like somehow they pulled it off, and I didn't want to know how they did it, but they figured it out. And I don't know if it was a thing that they shouldn't have been doing, or if it was something that was just, they were just kidding with me. But, half the time it was something that they figured out that they needed to get done and how to do it. And they figured it out, and it was efficient. It was fast. And it was perfect. And, we also learned from our mistakes. One thing I really liked about SEAL teams is when things screw up, and they do. And, you hope that nobody got hurt in that situation. And sometimes they did. We would really not only rehearse before the mission to make sure everything went as planned, but one thing you learn also, nothing goes as planned. So you have to have all these contingencies for when things go wrong, so you can just flow right into the next phase of it without being stuck and having to figure something out. You always have a contingency plan no matter where you are in your operations. And then at the end, you just play out everything that happened, and just everybody remembers what went right, what went wrong, and so that we don't repeat those wrongs again, and we make sure we do it right. And I tell you, lessons learned from all of these operations and other platoons operations really helped gel everything together on a work level and a personal trust level, because we all were growing together and learning these mistakes and successes together every time. And eventually it builds a very sharp team. And, you know, you stay in long enough, you get to be a master at that process of rehearsing, being able to react, you know, without hesitation, and then, you know, going over exactly what happened and reviewing the lessons learned from every single operation. I would say that skill set alone, being with the people that are just top notch, was some of my best memories ever of, you know, being in my 20s and being involved with that type of expertise was very impressive.
That's awesome. And as you mentioned before, some of those guys are still some of your best friends. Obviously, enduring those tough times together, you know, builds that bond. And you talk about flowing from phase to phase, and one of the next phases in your life was starting your own business. What were the struggles that came with that?
Well, that came with a huge amount of struggles, because it was 1999. You know, the military was downsizing. You know, remember, this was before 9/11, so it was a different world back then, completely different. And I had been married a few years. We had our first baby in 97, late 97. So my daughter was about 1 year old at the time as me getting out. I had a new home and I had a new business. And to be honest, I don't even remember that first year I was out. I mean, there was a lot that I was juggling to make happen my first year of getting out. And it was a struggle. I mean, like I said, it was near almost shock level. Like I said, you know, when you look back and you don't remember a certain event, just probably because you were in shock, or, you know, it was so stressful. I think that first year of getting out was very stressful. Plus, I lost my social network, because all those great guys that I was working with, we were really each other's social network too, no matter where we went in the world. And even at home, you know, we hung out together, and that was what you did. And I lost all that as well. So there was a lot of ups and downs. I had some successes in that first year, but I also learned some mistakes in business. And I wound up, you know, figuring out a way to work out and write about it for a living. And it was a long process before I got to that realization that I could actually do that. But with the advancements in technology, the internet was kind of just getting on in the 2000s, and you had to have dial-up. But, you know, it wasn't quite broadband. We couldn't do this yet, you know, with Zoom. But, you know, because of the, you know, advancements in, you know, technology, smartphones, social media, now able to do this, you know, streaming video. You know, I've done over 170 podcasts myself, and, you know, you have, one thing I learned is you have to stay flexible, and you have to be willing to evolve. Otherwise, I would have been stuck at one published book and never have moved on past that. Right. And now, you know, you get into downloadable products, you get into streaming video, you get, you know, there's a whole lot that you have to do, you know, especially with a fitness business, to actually sell books. You know, one thing I realized real quick is that I'm not a fitness business that sells books. I am a media company that sells fitness. If that makes sense, because you have to be now. Otherwise, you know, you're just going to be a brick and mortar store that sells to, you know, one segment of the population. So
yeah, that's fair.
So you are a business, but you actually give free workouts to future military, police, and firefighters. What made you want to give back to the community and start giving these free workouts?
you know what, this right here, the Heroes of Tomorrow, little sign there somebody made for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that group is. I call them the Heroes of Tomorrow. They're free workouts. If you're in the area, you can swing by. Now, I tend to close these to people who want to serve. But like I said, even if you're considering serving, you can come out to these workouts and join us and see what military style workouts are. When we have people from all backgrounds that, sporting backgrounds or non-sporting backgrounds that want to serve in military, law enforcement, firefighters, you got SWAT team guys and spec ops guys, and the whole gamut comes out, and we all perform these workouts together. And that's really based on the fundamentals of tactical fitness, like we discussed, those 3 phases, of getting them to and through the training. And depending on what that training is, we get into the specifics of how to prepare for them. We've had guys that come in at 350 pounds, and a year and a half later, they're 200 pounds. But we also have had guys that come in at D1 college athletes that move on to become special operators. We have a wide variety, but to be honest with you, they're my workouts that I invite people to join me on. So the way it started was I was swimming one morning at 6 a.m. at my pool, where, a local community center. And I saw these kids trying to do the combat swimmer stroke. I'm like, what are you guys doing? Just kind of messing around with them. And I said, let me show you how to do this one. I used to do this back in the day. And so I started showing them the combat swimmer stroke, and they realized what I was doing, who I was. And we figured it all out. And I said, well, I'm here every day at 6 if you want to show up. And then 2 people brought 2 more people. Next thing I know, I have a big group of 15, 20 people every day to work out with. And it's fun. Today we did a long run with probably 15, 20 people. And, these days you have to kind of spread yourself out a little bit so you don't look like a big group. But that's one good thing about running. It does spread you out a little bit. But no, they're fun. And and it gives me ideas to write about. I figure if I'm going to write about training, I should be training every day. And I should be training a variety of people, variety of abilities, variety of goals. And a variety of situations, right? Right now, we don't have a weight room, right? So what are you going to do, right? How are you going to train around that? And so that it gives me a lot of ideas to write about. So in fairness, it's nice. It's something I like to give back, but also I get so much more out of it personally as a, someone who likes to work out. I always have workout partners, but professionally, it also gives me ideas to write about, and those ideas become books and membership programs and things like that.
As you're teaching these younger generations of upcoming military personnel, what advice do you give to them based on the experiences that you've had?
You know what? That's a good question. One thing I have learned too in the last 20 years of doing this is that my numbers have not decreased at all because we've been in a war since 9/11. These numbers have gotten bigger, so there is a generation that wants to serve regardless of the situation that's out there, which gives me a lot of hope for the future, because these are very brave Americans that want to go help people, whether it's in the military or it's firefighters or police officers, their goal is to be a service to somebody. And that has been very rewarding for me to see as an older guy now, looking at the younger generation, because, when people make fun of the younger generation, I don't see it. All I see is brave men and women that want to serve every day. And I was like, where are you hanging out? Because these guys are awesome. When people make fun of millennials or Gen Z or, whatever generations they're making fun of. But yeah, they're awesome. But my advice is just, one day at a time. You build, a physical fitness foundation, one day at a time, one workout at a time, and you just have to be persistent with it, because your persistence will every day, build that notch of mental toughness and discipline that you need. We all come motivated into these jobs, but eventually your motivation goes away, right? You don't have any more motivation, 3 weeks into it and you're exhausted and tired from working out, 6 days a week, but your discipline is going to get you through and do that next workout, right? So, we build mental toughness one day at a time, not hitting that snooze button and staying in bed. That's a real easy way to build mental toughness. Jumping into the pool when you don't feel like getting wet, that's another way to build mental toughness. It's just one little bitty thing that you can do every day just to build you up on that notch of getting a little more mentally tough. And, it accumulates throughout the time you're training. And sometimes you need a year, maybe a little bit more to prepare, especially for the special ops world. So that's my advice. Just keep going at it.
Yeah. I love that, putting yourself in uncomfortable situations so that you continue to learn and to adapt. But Stewie, we can't thank you enough for coming on. It's been unbelievable hearing your story and, the advice that you're giving back to younger generations. And also we thank you for your service and the special forces. Obviously we're, so thankful and lucky enough to be, live in a free country where people, give their time to make sure that we live a good everyday life. So we can't thank you enough.
Oh, well, thank you very much. It's a great idea with the Adversity University. I love the title. I hope you guys do really well with this.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Very much.
Yeah.